Okay, so we're going to call or order the special meeting for May 24th, 2021. Madam Clerk, pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kevin, do you know how much you have to hold? You sure? Is that going to sit on the floor?
Another chair over there.
Councilman Asbill?
Present.
Councilman Buddy?
Present.
Councilman Chatelain?
Present.
Councilman Johnston?
Present.
Councilman Wheeler?
Present.
Mayor Boudier?
Present.
Police Chief Walker?
Here.
Fire Chief St. Cyr is absent. Finance Director Todd Tunion is absent. City Attorney Scott Stansberry?
Present.
And Municipal Clerk Nicole Lee, present.
All right, just real quick, thank you guys for your patience while we're trying to get the technical stuff worked out. I've been out all day on lift stations. We're rehabbing lift stations because I know sewer is a big concern of the public at this point in time. And so what we're doing is we're trying to make sure we get some kind of analysis on every lift station, looking at control panels, electrical, pumpability, whether it's submersible or non-submersible. And so that's what we're working on right now. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a congruent platform to run all our pumps on, because that way parts become interchangeable and we can actually run them more efficiently that way. So sorry for the late entrance. And Madam Clerk, we're going to go ahead right to ordinances for approval.
Mr. Mayor, I have a motion to amend the agenda.
I actually have a motion on the floor by Councilman Asbill to amend the agenda. What is the amendment?
To add new business number 1, setting a planning and zoning meeting for the month of June.
Is that the only amendment you want to? Is that the only one you have, Jace?
Yes, sir.
I also have a motion on the floor by Councilman Asbill to set up a June meeting for planning and zoning. Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yay.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Councilman Asbill, you want to take that up now?
We can, yes.
All right. Let's go ahead. Okay.
So move to amend the agenda to take up new business number 1 now.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Asbill to take up new business number 1 now. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Wheeler. All in favor?
Yay.
Yay.
5 yeas, 0 nays. We're going to take up new business at this moment.
Council, I'd like to set up a planning and zoning meeting for Wednesday, June 16th at 7 p.m. for the purposes of the Colonial ADA. It's Wednesday, June 16th at 7 p.m. for the purposes of a public hearing for the Colonial ADA.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Asbill to set up a plan. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, yeah. So we're good, well, so we have I'll go open the public hearing in a second. We have a motion on the floor by Councilman Asbill to set up a planning and zoning meeting for June 16th at 7 p.m. to have the ADA discussed and have it open into a public forum. Would anyone like to speak on this? Okay, no one coming forth. We'll now close public hearing. So we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Asbill. Do I have a second? Second by Councilman Buddy. All in favor?
Yay.
Yay.
5 yeas, 0 nays. All right, Planning and Zoning now has a meeting on June 16th at 7 p.m. to discuss the ADA.
And just for clarity, we have to, Madam Clerk, we need to advertise that at least 10 days, 3 times at least 10 days prior to the meeting.
Okay, you ready to move on to ordinances for approval? You guys, y'all ready? Okay.
They got the feed, but they don't have sound.
What's the matter?
These technically said they can't hear sound.
Are you getting good sound back there?
Great sound. We've got a little hum in it, but for the most part.
Okay. Sorry, guys. We're getting messages that the live feed on the internet isn't working for some reason.
Are you ready? Let's roll.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
All right. All right. All right, all right, all right.
Okay, this is my ordinance for the proposed the amended development agreement. It's working now,
It's
okay.
working now.
Great. This is my ordinance for the
Sound
proposed,
The sound is working now.
for the proposed amended development agreement for the Colonial property. Over the last couple of months, we've discussed it with several council members, the public, and the owners again, and we've got several amendments that several parties would like to see, and that I think we can get agreements on. And so we'd like to go through those, and unfortunately, we're gonna have to do it the painful way of just going through them one by one, to make sure that everybody's clear on what exactly they are. So my suggestion is everybody should have a copy of it. I'll tell you that from the copies that you have, there were some other minor changes that were made this afternoon, but the most current version is up on the screen. And if I can make it a little bit bigger if necessary. So you'll see on page 1, yes, sir. You'll see on page 1, there's a couple of just administrative things there by adding the parties and by mutual consent of the parties in a couple of different spots. On line 21 through 24, there is that ordinance, that resolution was finally adopted. I'm going to try to remember to follow with the screen. Y'all just yell at me if I don't, or don't. That resolution was adopted, so we just added the number there, added the date there. We are removing this entire whereas paragraph on lines 25 through 27.
Excuse me, Councilman Asbill. Question. You're referring to the previous meeting on the previous ordinance. You're amending the ordinance. It's going back to planning and zoning. Should line 22 read the June 16th date planned meeting? Because it's an amend. I mean, the ordinance is going back to them. It's going to be much different. Just your thoughts.
Maybe we can add it and say 12
Yes.
and 16.
So what I'll do is, and look, we can make real-time amendments here as well, just so we can track
Maybe
them.
we can say May 12th and June 16th, maybe something like that.
It,
Or either way.
it's two different ordinances, but that's fine. I just wanted to point out
this
that it
one.
might be a clerical correction.
Why is that? It's the same two colors. This is the green line resolution. It says it has to go back to the
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So it says that a public hearing was conducted on May 12, 2021, and again on June 16, 2021, presuming that hearing happens. Lines 25 through 27, we deleted altogether. There was no reason for the city to make that statement, although the developers would like us to. Section 1, the amendment.
Councilman Asbill, I have a request for the council to consider adding whereases to the document. They're the same whereases that we discussed when I met with you and the owner's representatives. I'd like them considered today. I apologize to the public. I just prepared this today. I didn't have a chance to publish anything. But the council has them in front of them.
Councilman Buddy, pardon me, but to keep this as clear as possible, I'd like to just go through my version
All right.
of the amendments that I have, and then if you have additional amendments, maybe we can discuss those at the end.
I'm sorry, say.
If you have additional amendments to mine, we can discuss those at the end, perhaps.
That'd be fine.
Okay. Just to make it clear, so we're not trying to throw it. Yes, sir.
I'm back and asking another question. I think we began here. I'm curious, you say you proposed it. So is that how it began? And what was the end in mind that you had in making this proposal? What was the benefit for the community?
Of the entire agreement?
Yeah, well, I know it's a lot, yeah.
Okay.
But
So,
what was the origin of it?
So what we'll do is we'll go into a public hearing before we go to vote, and then you'll be able to come up and ask your question, and then that way we'll go into and give you some feedback on your question like that. All right?
great. Section 3 added the word "and replace." It's replacing the old development agreement in 1777. In fact, we already made that change.
You do, but that's what I was saying, I don't see it.
Yeah, so I'm just going to add it here. No amendments on page 2.
Is section 6 customary? It seems like a slippery slope.
Can we hold questions till the end, please? Can you just make a note there on section 6? But yes, it is. So on the third page of your document, this is where the actual meat of the amended development agreement is. It is the amended development agreement. And you'll as you read through it, you'll see that it completely replaces the prior agreement.
And Councilman Asbill, when you get to the things that were changed this afternoon, could you point them out as being late changes?
Perhaps.
You'll give it your best shot?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, because I didn't track those separately, but yes. Where are we at? So lines 47 through 51, the change here is that we had a proposed ordinance listed there. Since then, that ordinance has been approved. So we just listed a new ordinance number. And the developer is actually amending that approval. It had 6 lots on there. They're amending it down to 5 bigger lots. And so they're changing it from lots 9 through 14 to lots 9 through 13. Those are those additional lots on Colonial that the council approved back in April.
And that date change too, you did, from 2021 to 2020 you did, on the next one.
Yes.
On 50, yeah.
Line 53, I had a bad date reference in there in December of 2021. Obviously, it's not right. Line 74 through 77. Just cleaning up some language here, saying that this amended development agreement and city ordinances shall regulate the development of the property. However, if there's any conflict between the development agreement and the city ordinances, the development agreement rules.
Say that again? You can't do that. I couldn't hear you.
Line 74 through 77 shows an amendment. There's some language cleanup in the beginning that says this agreement and the ordinances shall regulate and control develop at the property. If there's any conflict between the agreement and the ordinances, the agreement controls. The agreement controls. Paragraph 5. Sir, we're holding questions until the end, please. Thank you.
I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to follow and understand it. It seems like the amendment, the agreement is going to supersede the law, the ordinance. Is that what I'm told? If that's what I'm told, just say yes.
For the purposes of this property, yes.
Okay?
Paragraph 5. There's no changes in the first paragraph from the original amended development agreement that was submitted. The second paragraph, there was some language in the original development agreement that was left out regarding non-permissible use of multifamily housing, triplex housing, and townhouses on the commercial property. There is some additional language that's been added in here since, and that is located right here. Mr. Thomas, it's lines 96 through 100. And it's residential, detached, near lot line homes such as garden homes and patio homes with minimum lot areas and setback regulations as specified herein. not less than 35 feet, not less than 80 feet, with minimum side yards of 3 feet, with a 10-foot and rear foot setback on the commercial shall be allowed. Number 6 is just language cleanup, paragraph 6. Paragraph 7 is also language cleanup and also cleaning up those lot numbers for the 5 and 6 lots. Okay. Paragraph 11 is a new addition, and it reads, "The owner shall be permitted to develop lots along the entirety of Colonial Club Drive with a building setback from the front property line on lots 1 through 13 of 40 feet and 45 feet on all other lots along Colonial Club Drive. The standard in the area for that subdivision and across the street is a 30-foot setback from the street." So this is exceeding the minimum standards. Paragraph 11 was deleted. That talks about previously in the 40 acres where the developer could not build along Colonial Club Drive. In exchange for number 11, the owner has agreed to construct a primary access road with ingress and egress situated on Jefferson Highway to service the interior subdivision lots. Said road shall become permanent and used beginning at the infrastructure construction phase. There shall also be a singular secondary access road located on Club Drive or Colonial Club Drive as determined and allowed by an updated traffic impact analysis at owner's cost. Owner shall require all construction vehicles to use the Jefferson Highway access road. Enforcement, however, shall be against the individual violators. So there's going to be the necessity for a secondary access road to the subdivision for obvious safety concerns, and the traffic impact analysis and updated impact analysis will tell us where that can and should be located. I don't want to speak for the owner, but I know he said it several times, is that his preference is to locate that on Club Drive over near the clubhouse. Number 13 takes out the wall requirement on the Colonial sideline because now there will be homes, so there's no need for a wall behind those homes. Paragraph 14, it's adding some language that was in the original development agreement that was left out in this amended development agreement.
Councilman Asbell,
Yes, sir.
I have a question about just point of clarity. You want me to hold that till later? Or you
No, we
want-
can.
I'm reading it, and I'm trying to determine if this is, it says residential rear lot line setback, which would imply this 35-foot is on the lot. Is that the intention, or was this, I thought it was to be a 35-foot setback from the lot line?
No, the lot line is a setback from the original property line. So the new property line becomes 35 feet inside the original property line.
Okay. This calls it a 35-foot buffer and residential rear lot line setback.
So the new residential lot will be 35 feet inside the current Colonial property lot.
Are we talking about the 40-acre plan?
We're talking about paragraph 13.
13 or 14, sir?
Oh, 14, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. It's a little confusing to me. If it makes sense to everybody else, then it's just me. But it would seem that it's adjoining the lot. This makes it sound like it's on the lot to me, Jason.
35-foot servitude behind the property.
But
It's not a servitude.
It is a residential rear lot line setback. It sounds like it's on the person's lot. I have servitudes on my lot that are on my property. The point that I'm hoping we can agree on is, how do you say this such that it's a setback behind the residential lots? It's adjoining or
Right.
extending
Okay.
from the residential
So the
lot.
setback word is throwing it off, you think?
Yeah, that's what threw me off,
Okay.
sir.
35-foot buffer
The
residential.
setback on the existing property.
Right, a setback is on the person's lot, the way I view it. I'm not sure that's technically correct.
Does that help, Mr. Tom? If you look at your screen,
Right.
So, I'm sorry,
You're just taking setback out.
and adding a new residential, new rear lot line, basically.
it's still confusing to me, sir, and it may just be me. I'm not sure
Okay,
what others may think.
Good question, Roger.
okay, we'll put a mark by it, and we'll come back to it
Right.
if possible.
Well, we'll have an opportunity to review it.
Just something really quick.
Go
I
ahead.
know you don't want to- It's occurring to me that, and I don't want to interrupt, I say this all the time, I want to be held just like the public can't speak, but at the same time, if you make, in theory, everything here I've already agreed to. So if you make a change, it can't be a unilateral change,
Right.
right? In other words, I have to agree to. So my only question is, do you want to look down at each change and go, y'all okay with that? Or do you want to run through this whole thing, make the red lines and new red lines, and then go, Danny?
Let's do that.
Okay.
Run through the whole thing.
I like it.
Paragraph 15, there were some prohibitions in the old agreement because they could not build within the 40 acres. This removes those prohibitions, obviously, because now they will have driveways within that, and there is no longer a 75-foot buffer requirement along Colonial Club Drive. Paragraph 16 is some language cleanup with a wrong reference section and just adding a definition there. Paragraph 17, so the owner has already submitted the proposed 34 lots, which has been approved. In consideration of owner constructing the Jefferson Highway Access Road, owner shall be permitted to administratively redesign the preliminarily approved 34 lots before the conditional plat plan filing. So they can go in and redraw the lot lines to accommodate the new access because they no longer have a road where there could be a lot, and now they're going to have a road where there was a lot. So before they submit their next plan, they can redraw it without going through preliminary again. They still have to go through conditional and final approval. Paragraph 17 is just clarifying that the 50-foot home height maximum was intended only for those homes immediately adjacent to the Mississippi River levee, not all of the homes within the 13 acres.
And Jason, you may have noticed you have 17 twice, 217, sir, just a housekeeping. You go up some more to where 15 would be?
Okay. Yeah. I can clean that up. Start it over for some reason. That's weird. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Paragraph 18, line 185. This is an addition. We wanted to put a cap on the number of homes, if allowed. If the owner was allowed to use the existing sanitary sewer facilities for the back 13 acres, we put a maximum number of homes. And this homes came from the current, drawing that the owner envisions. Number 19 is a new paragraph altogether. If owner finds it feasible, there may be a new private access street located to tie onto Forte Lane. This is a little bit of a change from the one that you have out there. It's just cleaning it up a little bit. There may be a new private access street located to tie on Forte Lane to service the levee lots. If access is provided on Forte Lane, owner shall widen and resurface Forte Lane to city's minimum standards as set forth in the Code of Ordinances at no cost to the city. So there's just for clarification, if you go down Colonial Club Drive, you take a right on Club Lane that heads back to the clubhouse. There's another small street back there called Forte Lane. It's got 4 or 5 houses on the back of it. That road is really bad right now. There may be an opportunity for the developer to develop the back 13 acres as a private access gated community just for those 13 acres. If they add a private street into that neighborhood, they'll be required to update and upgrade the existing Forte Lane at their cost. Paragraph 20 removed the 17-acre reference strictly because it doesn't state the actual acreage in the ECR, but they are required to have 15 acres of drainage servitude. '21 cleans up some language and adds and just clarifies that both residential and development parcels must use the detention pond for stormwater runoff, but they may use it for other purposes, whether they be recreational or whatever, subject to limitations under their homeowners association's rules that they're going to put together back there. But it puts the responsibility clearly on the commercial parcels to maintain it. Whoever the owners of that are or their owners association up there will maintain that. Talks about the 22 talks about repair and maintenance of it and the standards. There's some additions here that just give it a little bit more teeth, that it's going to be by the more stringent of best practices, this agreement, or the Code of Ordinances adopted at the time of this agreement, including the nuisance and subdivision regulations. And subdivision regulations has some pretty in-depth language about the maintenance of the stormwater management area. Nothing on 23, 24 is just language cleanup. '25 has some significant changes in it, so I'll just read it as it would be amended. Owner and the city acknowledge and agree that an overall drainage impact analysis was submitted for the property by owner's engineers, and the city's engineers has concurred with owner's calculations dated August 15th, 2019 and amended September 4th, 2019, and the stormwater management area was finally accepted and approved on December 10th, 2020 with the issuance of the certificate of occupancy for the Blake Senior Living Facility. The drainage impact analysis shall be updated by the owner's engineer at the time of each filing of each conditional plat plan. So every time the owner makes a new submission for a conditional approval of a different plat back in that subdivision, they have to update their drainage impact to make sure that all the calculations are current and still good. Paragraph 26 discusses the potential of a pump to the river project, and that if such project does go forward, and if an updated drainage impact analysis allows for a decrease in stormwater management area, the owner may decrease their stormwater management area and convert that to the adjacent residential use. '27 has some language cleanup from the engineers about recommendations rather than approvals, because they don't approve, they just make recommendations. 28 has a new sentence, a couple of new sentences added to it, and it says, unless otherwise recommended by an updated drainage impact analysis, all areas of commercial parcels and all residential parcels shall drain to the stormwater management area, with the exception of the front yards of the residential development parcels that face Colonial Club Drive. In no case shall owner alter or increase drainage flow to the detriment of neighboring properties. Paragraph 29 discusses sewer, and just make sure that the owner agrees that all sewer flow from the property will go into the lift station that they've built at Jefferson Highway and Colonial Club Drive, and that they do and will continue to maintain that lift station. And provided that owners make all impact payments to the city as required by this agreement, and property owners make impact fee payments as required by ordinances, the city shall accommodate sewage capacity to the residential and commercial parcels. Section 7 starts discussing payments to the city. There's a may from a shall, and then there's a text change there. It should be section 86 of the Code of Ordinances, not 84. Some more basic changes on the lot numbers with the revisions that are going to be coming. Again, the ordinance change. Let me see what this next one's about. Paragraph 32 just clarifies how the advance deposit fees are going to work. And it's a good explanation, and it basically takes the explanation that I've made in the past and puts it in writing, in so much as the developer is going to pay $500,000 upfront in advance deposit fees, and those will be credited to the lot owners as they purchase lots and start to build homes. So if you buy a lot 1 and you come in, you file your building permit, and your impact fee is going to be $7,000, you don't have to pay that impact fee because the owner's already paid it. However, if you're on lot 100 and you come in and you have a $7,000 impact fee, and all the impact fees have already been used up, then you're going to be responsible for your impact fee. What this does, it gives money that we know is going to come from the property eventually through impact fees. It gives money up front to the city from the developer to start making enhancements to the system to accept the extra capacity in the system. And it makes the clarification that owner understands that if any portion of the $500,000 goes unused, they will not be issued a refund for it.
Before we move on, I just wanted to bring up that, like I mentioned at last meeting, I had to leave early today for a prior engagement, so I just wanted to let y'all know that I got to head out. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
I'll see y'all at the meeting.
Okay.
$33 just makes it clear that we cannot institute new impact fees once this agreement, or new impact fees will not apply to properties within this agreement, so that we don't start hitting them with new impact fees. 34 is just some language cleanup. The property owners are gonna make an additional grant of $150,000 for capital projects besides sewage, drainage, and streets. They're also gonna make an additional $100,000 in capital grants for recreation projects. Both of those will be paid within 30 days of execution of the agreement or approval of the agreement. And then 36 just adds some language there that if they don't timely pay, we need to have some recourse for them. So we're going to go after them to collect the money, and they'll be responsible for fees and costs incurred by the city for collection. $37 is a pretty significant change. The city shall implement an expedited procedure by adjusting its advertising practices by simultaneously advertising the council agenda with the Planning and Zoning Commission agenda so that such advertisements may run concurrently. Additionally, after any final plat plan approval, owner may seek administrative re-subdivision per section 8626, notwithstanding 8626A1D. What this does, it provides the owner with all the rights that a current developer has that's not a private subdivision. So right now, if the owner were to submit a plan to make 34 lots, he can't come back and change that and make it 30 lots, 30 bigger lots, because he's a private subdivision. Anyone else in this room that didn't have a private subdivision can do that, but because he's a private subdivision, he can't do that. So we're just giving him that recourse, and this is only to move lot lines or to make less lots. He cannot increase the number of lots. He can't do it if it includes 6 lots or more. He cannot do it if it includes an acre or more. So he can only move lot lines within the minimum standards of this ordinance, which is 75 by 120.
Councilman Asbill, is the intention to have concurrent planning and zoning scheduling with council scheduling only for this property?
I think it's a practice we can adopt citywide. I think it's something we should adopt citywide because it encourages new development. But we're just making it clear that we're going to do it for this property.
As it reads right now, how do you interpret it? Is it just for this property, or?
I don't think it's just for this property, no.
Okay, thank you.
Paragraph 40. This says, in addition to the traffic impact fees, the owner will bear all the costs associated with implementing recommendations of the traffic impact analysis that has been and will be created by the owner's engineer. So in addition to paying the impact fees, they're going to have to pay for any of the street improvements that need to be made, as far as adding the street in the subdivision, connecting it to Jefferson Highway. If any parts of the neutral ground on Jefferson Highway have to be closed up by recommendation of the traffic impact analysis, they have to pay for that as well. That's not going to be borne by the city. So every time they come in, every time the developer comes in to make a filing for a plat of land to start splitting lots up, they still are required to pay their filing fees, which is what paragraph 41 says. '41 talks about tie-in to the Jefferson Parish water system, and it makes it clear that it's the owner's expense, and they're responsible for designing in conjunction or in concurrence with Jefferson Parish. And the fire hydrant placement and fire flow tests and all that good stuff, they're required to do that with Jefferson Parish because it's the Jefferson Parish water system. No changes in 43, no changes in 44. No changes in 45, or I'm sorry, several changes in 45. It adds this this sentence on the back there, and there's just some recourse in case this agreement encounters legal challenges by either party, or either party is sued by a third party on this agreement. That all obligations shall be stayed, and any payments previously made to the city shall be held in escrow and not expended until such time as finally adjudicated through a judgment upholding the validity of the ordinance. Um, 48 adds some additional and subsequent transferees, successors, and assigns to make sure that this agreement is binding forever and for everyone. So if they sell property, this agreement still binds a new party. Nothing 48 or 49, nothing on 50, nothing on 51, nothing on, or 52 says that any amendment to this agreement shall be in writing and executed by both owner and any existing owners associations and the city. So if we start amending this agreement and they've created a commercial owners association or homeowners association, they also must be a party to the amendment to agree for their different constituents. 54 adds an indemnity clause, and I will have an additional amendment to this recommended by the city's attorney that didn't make it in here for this evening, but it will before the next council meeting, but it just adds some insurance requirements to back up the indemnity clause. Is that a fair, Mr. Best? Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, what I would like to do is first open it up to the owner's discussion and then open it up to public discussion. And I'm okay if we want to get into public discussion, if we want to have questions and answers reasonably.
Okay. All right. Rock and roll.
Excuse me, Councilman Asbill, would you, after that, we would consider my amendments?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And one other clarification, this indemnity agreement is different from the indemnity agreement in the development agreement, correct?
This actually is the indemnity agreement that was in the original development agreement. It was changed in the first version of the amended development agreement. I went back and put the amended I went back and put 1777 language there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Danny McCarron, 42 Colonial. So I don't have much in terms of the DA. What I did want to do was take my time today. I think what I've heard a few times from citizens, and we also had new planning and zoning board members, quite a few of them, and I believe y'all were going to ask some of them to be here. Did that happen?
There's a few here that
Okay.
I know.
So to the effect that what seems to be a cause of confusion, as I've heard time and time again, is I'll just generally say the public is, man, who's for lack of a better term, like who's checking things around here? This guy can just draw up lines, and so we do have a Harahan Code of Ordinances that's in place. And so what I have asked is Steve Villavasso, who is a planning and zoning guru, to be here to go over specifically what Harahan, forget about me or anybody else, just if this property is ever going to be developed, what the current Harahan Code of Ordinances does and the procedure for getting to the point that you're actually putting a house up. And I've spoke at it once before, but preliminary, conditional, and final. There's 3 stages to get that done. And then the other thing I did was ask Scott Tabery with Duplantis Design Group, who is our engineers on this property, to kind of do a sort of the same thing. If he could talk about what the process is for even, for instance, on the Blake itself, Scott, on the Blake. Duplantis also represented the Blake on that, so he can speak to the process of how they got that built and did the only thing I'll say to the development agreement, and literally the only thing is, I just want to be clear that the public understands, like, when I purchase the property, there is a development agreement in place. It's the original development agreement. I'm okay with that development agreement. From the moment I purchased this, I was asked by the council and the planning and zoning board members at the time to consider doing an amended development agreement. We started that process 20 months ago. We went through a round. I even paid legal fees on behalf of the city to negotiate that development agreement. That finally went away, and I said, guys, I'll just keep the old development agreement. We then started this process again approximately 5 or 6 months ago, and so here it is, and this is where we're at. And so the only thing I would ask the council is expeditious decision, whether it's to vote this down or to vote it up, but just I'm somewhat at a stalemate until I mean I can do what everyone knows is the entrance as we have now, or I can do the altar one under an amendment, and I'm okay with either, but I would ask that it not get extended. That's it. And so I'd like to ask Steve Villavasso if you could come up and maybe give a very quick explanation of preliminary, conditional, and final approval.
Does that matter if
It doesn't address that. So to be clear, so as a point, that agreement does, but if you notice, it doesn't say anything about, they're not letting, I'm not requesting, nor are they letting me, although that's a good point, maybe I should have.
The agreement says that right now.
No, it doesn't. That agreement does not address, it doesn't address me stopping the three-step procedure, preliminary, conditional, and final. So I am not requesting, nor are they giving me permission. So in that situation, the Code of Ordinances still holds true, right, on that one issue. But no, I'm not an attorney, too. I should say that.
Thanks. Steve Villavasso. Most people know me, but for the record, I'm a city planner. I've been practicing city planning for over 40 years. Been involved with this project for half of my professional life. Over 20 years. Been working on the Colonial project. But I'm not here to talk about that in general. Mr. McCarron asked me to talk about specifically the process that the city of Harahan uses to approve subdivisions, okay? And when I use the word subdivision, and as you all know, I'm also a professor, so I'm going to keep this short. This is not a law lecture or a lecture in graduate school. And some of you have heard this, okay? Some of you have heard this in the training sessions that I've done, and I appreciate that. But some have not heard it, and so I'm just going to try to do a high-level view of this. But a subdivision approval is about whenever anybody wants to create a new lot to build something on it, they need to subdivide land. So that's where you get the word subdivision from. And if you want to build something on a new lot, you need to make sure the right infrastructure is there. You need to make sure the drainage works, the sewer system works, the right road is there. And so subdivisions approval processes are all about creating a parcel that is ready to be built on, and the infrastructure to support that building is there. So it's all about the infrastructure, okay? So with that introduction, Harahan has what I would call a sound and standard set of subdivision regulations. Though, when I say the word regulations, that means it's a law. So it's the law of the land in Harahan, okay? And that law of the land in Harahan comes from state law, and I always bring my little blanket here. This is the state law. These are the laws of the state of Louisiana, including the Larson Act, that give the city of Harahan the authority to create rules to subdivide property. So it's a little building block process, and in state law, there are some general provisions about what local government has to do when you subdivide property. So local government, though, takes these state laws and puts some very specific regulations in place. And when I called them sound and standard, what I meant is these regulations, your subdivision regulations, I say they're great because I helped write them, but I say Harahan's is great because your council, your prior councils approved them in an ordinance and made these the law of the land, okay? And I say they're standard because this approach of a three-step process to approve a subdivision is used in communities all over the state of Louisiana, okay? So it's a standard approach. Some communities tweak them and put little nuances in it. But just because it's standard doesn't mean it's bad. It means it works, okay? So with that introduction, you have what I call a three-tier system. It's a very, I think, a good approach with checks and balances. Checks and balances that allow your city staff and your city technical support people, your city engineer, your regulatory department, your city attorney, all those people have a role in looking at this. And then your appointed public bodies, your planning commission, they have a specific role in reviewing and recommending and approving subdivisions. And then finally, the council, as the legislative body, has the final say-so in this process in each step as we go through. And don't forget the most important part of that, that's the public, the citizens. The citizens have a role in every one of these steps through public comment, through signs in yards, through public hearings. And so it's a system that's balanced, and I could go on about that, but let's just talk about the three tiers or the three pieces. The first is preliminary approval. I just printed a copy of it from Unicode. By the way, anybody can go read this online. Harahan's Code of Ordinances is on Unicode. You look up Unicode Harahan, you can get this on. You don't have to go to the Harahan website, although it may be on Harahan's website too. But this is your set of subdivision regulations. Easy to read, easy to get to. Three-step process. The first thing you have to do is, if someone wants to subdivide land, as I said earlier, you have to present a preliminary plat. Show the city how you want to create the lots. And the word preliminary is important there. The word preliminary is designed to allow for a landowner to look at your code, and that's the rest of your code, all the standards, and decide what that landowner wants to do with their land and come up with a preliminary idea of how he wants to divide up those lots, okay? And an owner will make the best shot at meeting that code and deciding how it's going to fit into the city street, water, and sewer systems, and put together a preliminary plat and present that to the city. And the idea is that's not the final one, and the city has never seen it before, so the owner presents that preliminary plat, and the city looks at it at that first step as a preliminary plan. It gets sent to the city engineer, it gets sent to the regulatory department, it gets sent to the city attorney, and boxes start getting checked, and a conversation starts to go back and forth between the developer, or the property owner, and the city of Harahan. And at the end of the preliminary plat approval, and in Harahan, we take the preliminary plat and we give it to the Planning Commission. We let the Planning Commission have a role there. Not every community does that. Some communities actually keep it administrative and don't send it to the Planning Commission until the next step in the process. But you send it to the Planning Commission, which is perfectly okay. So the Planning Commission looks at the preliminary plat and they make a recommendation, because remember, the Planning Commission is only making recommendations in their role as a planning commission, as a public body with respect to subdivision. And if everything looks okay, and I'm using that term very technically, it's not a legal term, Mr. Buddy, but if everything looks okay, the preliminary plat then is approved to go to the next level, because at the next level, conditional approval, that's sort of where the rubber meets the road, because now the developer has a pretty good idea of how his plan fits into the city, and the city departments have kind of given a lot of feedback, and the Planning Commission has let the citizens look at it, and the Planning Commission said, okay, you can go to, now conditional approval, that's when I say the rubber meets the road, because now the developer is going to go say, okay, engineer, I want you to actually design how the sewer system's going to work, how the drainage system's going to work. Traffic guys, how wide the street's going to be, how thick the concrete's going to be, and come up with, if you want to look at this in terms of graphics, the preliminary plat might be 5 pieces of paper, might be big pieces of paper. And after you go back and you talk to all those technical folks, you come back with a big, giant roll of plans, because that roll of plans is going to have all the details about what kind of nails you're going to put in stuff and how thick the concrete's going to be, as I said. And now that is presented to the city at the second level of the process, and that's submission of the conditional plat. And again, that big roll of plans goes to city departments. Now they're unrolled. Now they've really got the microscopes out and looking at all the details, and there's still a back and forth going on. Maybe the drainage isn't quite right. Maybe the developer used a 6-inch pipe and your engineer says it should be an 8-inch pipe. So there's a back and forth that goes on there. And finally, that conditional plat, that big roll of plans, goes to the Planning Commission. And at this point, the Planning Commission has a specific role to approve by recommendation the conditional plat, the conditional layout of the subdivision. I say recommendation again because at this point in the process, that Planning Commission recommendation goes to the council. So now you guys got to go to work at that point, and ladies, all of y'all have to go to work at the conditional plat approval process, because at that point, when the Planning Commission recommends approval and all the little tweaks have done to it, and everybody's happy with the way the 6-inch pipe works, and you hold the public hearing, and the council approves the conditional plat, now it's not the rubber meets the road, it's the hammer meets the nail. Because at that point, the developer now takes that big set of plans with lots of details in it that now has the approval, and that developer says, I can now go build this infrastructure to support this subdivision that I want to build. And so at that point, you have your conditional approval that's gone through the Planning Commission, public hearings, all the technical reviews, and the council then approves the conditional plat, and the developer takes that conditional plat and then goes start building the infrastructure. He doesn't build any houses. You're not building houses. You're building infrastructure. You're building the street, you're building the sewer, you're building the drainage, and at the end of that process, the developer then comes up with something called as-built plans. As-built plans is just documenting what the developer did out on the site, because at that point, it's not a piece of paper that people are looking at. The city of Harahan has inspectors that are going to go out there and actually make sure there's a 6-inch pipe there, and inspect and look at inspections. The concrete is the right thickness, the concrete is the right whatever, you know. And so the developer goes and builds the infrastructure, develops what I call as-built plans, and when everything is built, the developer comes back to the city of Harahan and says, I'm ready for final approval. Final approval is based on all those inspection boxes have been checked, the pipe is right, the concrete's right, everything is in accordance with the big roll of plans, and it goes back to the Planning Commission because your technical departments have said, yes, they passed all the inspections, checked all the boxes, we recommend approval, the Planning Commission. At this point, it becomes a little bit of a not a parochial approval, but obviously at this point it's more of a checks and balances, because what if there wasn't a 6-inch pipe and it was a 5-inch pipe? Well, no, we're not going to give you final approval, okay? You didn't use the right concrete, you got to go rip it out and put the right concrete in. After it's all, in your opinion, and your technical review folks' opinion, say it's right, then you grant final approval. That final approval is the final step that the developer can now then go to the clerk of court's office and say, I now have legal lots of record with the right infrastructure, and theoretically or legally, he can start selling property. So that's sort of a layman's approach as to really how this whole thing works in terms of subdividing property. I'll go back to the beginning. This, of course, assumes that the zoning is right. Okay, we're not here to talk about zoning tonight, but you know me, that's what I teach. This, of course, assumes that your master plan is right. I'm talking about the master plan of the city of Harahan, which you do have one. It's over 10 years old. We've got to fix that one day, Mr. Mayor, okay? But you do have a master plan, and you do have zoning, and those are the building blocks that leads to how you actually build the infrastructure to support what you want to see in your community. So that's my quickie thing. I'm glad to answer questions, and I'm sorry if I went too long.
Can I ask two questions
Sure.
to clarify two points that you made? So I've noticed, you talked about the preliminary approval process, and I've noticed in our ordinances that it doesn't require that the preliminary approval process go to the planning and zoning, but we do that.
Yes, sir.
Is it your understanding that that's not required? So you go from preliminary is usually all administrative and technical, and then the first thing that gets submitted to planning is usually conditional. Is that right?
That, the way your law is written, you do not have to get the planning commission to sign off, I'm using that term loosely, on preliminary approval. Your ordinance is written as a standard approach. A standard approach is, this is sort of an in-house game, so to speak. The developer takes his best shot at putting together a preliminary approach as to how it works. The administrative staff of the city, it goes back and forth, and at some point, the way your ordinance reads, I think it's your city engineer and your regulatory director, and there may be a couple, maybe it's the fire chief and the police chief too. It's all check boxes, and the way your ordinance is written, if those specific approvals are granted in your law, the developer has the authority to go to conditional approval.
Right.
So,
And I've noticed, my second question is, I've noticed that a couple of lots that we've done on this property go straight to final approval. It skips preliminary, it skips conditional. Can you explain why it does that?
well, that's a great question, and that's a little nuance that has occurred in some of these projects and can occur in other projects, and that is based on the fact that there are no public improvements being made in that subdivision of property. Remember, let's say I've got one big lot and I want to cut it in half because I want to give one to one kid and one to the other kid. The lot already exists. There's already a drainage line on it. There's already a sewer line on it. It's on a street. There are street lights. And so there's actually no physical improvements needed. There are no public improvements needed. And so in that instance, I'm going from one lot to two lots. I can go right to final because I'm not building anything. I don't need to go look at the pipes. I don't need to measure the thickness of the concrete. And so that is allowed in your ordinance, and that's very common across the state.
Yes, so I just bring that up to make the point that that might be some of the confusion, is that the typical re-subdivision in the Harahan is usually splitting one or two lots, no public improvements need to be made, so it goes to final, whereas this is kind of new to everybody in this room because it's been a while since we had a real subdivision created.
Yes, sir.
And so it's got to go through the whole process, and people, it clears it up on why it's taken so long and why other properties don't have to go through that process. Thank
Sure.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
I have one question.
Sure.
After the work required under the conditional approval is performed, it's signed off by the city's inspectors, regulatory, it still goes to planning and zoning?
It does go back. You do it. I mean, your ordinance allows it to go back to planning and zoning. They're only recommending at that point. Maybe it's just a checks and balances approach, but
And so our ordinance currently requires go to planning and zoning.
I would not say yes to that.
Well, and my
Councilman Buddy.
point being that it seems inefficient because it's all technical matters. But it does go to the council?
It absolutely goes to the council. But here's why it goes to the council. You're the legislative body, and you're accepting improvements built by a private entity into the city of Harahan. So a developer builds a sewer line to your specifications as per the conditional approval, and when you feel that it's met all the standards, all the check boxes, and you say, I approve this, it becomes your sewer line. Now there are provisions in your ordinance about long-term maintenance and guarantees and warranties, and there's little nuances that what if I want to put a private package plan in? Let's not go into that. That's like the bonus question on the graduate school test, okay? Everybody gets that one wrong, by the way. But I agree with you, Councilman Buddy. I think part of the approach that Harahan has in other communities is just in the spirit of openness and transparency. So I see this in lots of other communities.
Just my suggestion is we consider removing that technicality of sending it to planning and zoning. I mean, they're gonna see what our experts, our subject matter experts have determined as to the construction and what's to approve. It's not a zoning issue at that point in time. So
It's
my
not a
suggestion is-
regulation issue either, by the
Yeah,
way,
my-
because you're way past zoning. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, my suggestion is we consider amending that in the future to make it more efficient. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Mr. Villavasa, would you be willing to answer some questions from the audience?
It's your deal, sure.
Ms. Benton, can you please get up so that people can hear you, please?
Yeah, just be loud.
Or just maybe share the microphone?
So my question is, I have a lot of questions, but
You know what, Steve? Maybe you can, Steve, if you want to maybe use the fire, I'm just saying, see if, maybe, sorry, I'm trying to get everybody. See if there you go.
Okay.
Is that better for everyone? Okay.
Yes.
All right, Sue.
Okay, so the situation is we have a 10-year-old master plan. And at the planning and zoning, I think in April, Mr. McCarron, okay, and we changed owners. We have a new owner. And Mr. McCarron stated at that meeting that he didn't know what he was going to do with the property, so he couldn't provide a master plan. So you did say that. And I've never seen a master plan until the last council meeting or the last planning and zoning meeting. He presented something. But as far as I know, there's nothing been formally provided from the owner to the city for a new master plan. And obviously, he intends to deviate greatly from the 10-year-old plan. So how would you suggest that the city handle that?
Well, let me answer the question in a general way, and I admit there's been a lot of confusion over the last couple of years about these two words, master and plan. I've spent 40 years trying to figure it out. I've written law review articles, taught courses at Loyola and UNO, and probably a half dozen people in this room. But I've done a lot of research about what the subdivision regulations of Harahan says about the two words master and plan, and what the Louisiana revised statutes say about the two words master and plan. By the way, as I said, your regulations are not unique. You can go to Nulano or Gonzales and you'll find almost the exact same set of subdivision regulations. So let's talk about this very good question this citizen has asked. And the subdivision regulations in preliminary plat approval say a master development plan depicting all sites and proposed phases of subdivision. A master development plan. Let's go to the statutes. Where does the word master plan show up in Louisiana state law? It's 33106. Sorry, I'm going to give a law review lecture here. Okay, 33106 says, a municipal planning commission shall make and adopt a master plan. We hear the words in both sets of statutes. The words are completely different. Completely different. Harahan does have a master plan in accordance with 33106 that was adopted 10 years ago. I didn't mean to criticize that plan a few minutes ago because I helped the city divide it. When I gave the mayor a little reminder, it's just that 10 years, you might want to update your master plan as is required by Louisiana state law, Louisiana revised statute 33106. That's the master plan of the city of Harahan. That is not the master development plan that is referred to in your subdivision regulations. So what is the master development plan referred to in the subdivision regulations? I've done a lot of thinking about this and cross-referencing it. It's in the preliminary plat approval. Remember, we said the preliminary plat approval is almost an administrative approach because it's just your regulatory director and your engineer and your city attorney looking at the plans and the planning commission getting some feedback and then telling the developer, okay, go do your conditional plan and come back with that big roll of plans. But your rules say, your regulations say, a master development plan, that's not a master plan, depicting all sites and proposed phases of the subdivision. Okay, and then it says, this master development plan should also show how the development would be integrated in the city's street, water, and sewer systems. These words are not chosen at random when this regulation was written, okay? This is at the preliminary approval process, and it says, show how the phases are integrated, okay? You could take one definition of integrated, okay, here's a big vacant piece of land, and here are the streets that go into that vacant piece of land. And one way to integrate them is just continue those streets across there. Would that meet the standard at the preliminary plat approval for a master development plan? I think so. I think that's the spirit of this, because this is the preliminary plat approval for the development plan. And as was suggested, oh, there have been changes. Well, if you really keep reading, and you get to the conditional approval process in the subdivision regulations, it says the conditional plat shall conform to the approved preliminary plat, remember that sort of, and shall include all changes. So the conditional approval process anticipates, or maybe even recommends, that whatever happens in preliminary are going to be changed. And so there's nothing wrong with an evolving set of plans as you move through this process, okay? And then here's the final kicker, in my opinion, so that I don't get confused, and I hope other people don't, about what this master development plan is. Because then it says the conditional plat shall contain only that portion of the preliminary plat which the subdivider or developer wishes for approval and recorded and developed at that time. So this conditional approval anticipates, A, there are going to be changes, B, that as you go forward, you're going to get this phase approved, and then you're going to come back and get the next phase approved to be approved, recorded, and developed at that time. And so large-scale projects are long-term projects that have pieces, also known as phases. And so to me, this master development plan is not the master plan of the city of Harahan. We got that done. We're gonna update it one day. The master development plan, as required by your preliminary plat approval, again, at the preliminary plat level, is at the preliminary plat level. It does anticipate there are going to be changes, and the mere fact that it actually requires the developer to get only that portion that they want approved, and I'll just refer to this project. I've been speaking in general so far, but this project has got lots of moving pieces. It's got 5 lots. It's got 13 lots. It's got 30 lots. It's got 40 lots. I can't even keep track. You guys need to keep track of that, okay? But my point is, each one of those is an approved, recorded, developed piece at that time. So your ordinance anticipates that it's a moving target. Your ordinance anticipates that there is a checks and balances and there's a 3-step process. And in the last 20 years, I've probably gone to 150 hearings about this project. I'm not exaggerating. And so a lot of information and a lot of dialogue, and there's nothing wrong with that.
It seems from what you've said, if I've understood you correctly, that as to our ordinance, the master plan.
Master development plan is what your
plan.
regulations say.
Master development plan is a snapshot in time of the entirety of the development. And that the conditional phase, and even the, maybe even the preliminary phase, no, the conditional phase would be for the lots, the phase construction. Let's just, for purposes, say there's going to be 125 houses on Colonial, and the developers want to develop 1 through 34.
Right.
1 through 8, 9 through 15. They come in for conditional on those. They're required to spend the money engineering on those, and it goes through the approval process, the construction process, the acceptance process. But back to the specific question of Ms. Benton, and my question, and my English language interpretation of master development plan, it assumes a plan showing everything that is envisioned at that point in time on the property. And we haven't seen that, we haven't seen it lately. And I think some of us would like to see it, some citizens would like to see that. It's not saying the when or the sequencing of the developer's construction, it's just the big picture to know what we can expect with potential changes down the road. We don't seem to have that. And I may be mistaken.
Well,
if the city has it, I haven't seen it yet, and it's possible the city has that.
I'll answer it in general. I'll answer, because there are two things in here that I'm hanging my hat on, that I've read this section so many times. And the only guidance that the city of Harahan has about what this master development plan is 2 sentences. That's it. There are no measurable standards as to what goes in it, okay, other than it should depict sites and proposed phases of the subdivision. That's the first guiding sentence that your laws say. And then it says it should include how the proposed development should be integrated into the street, water, and sewer systems. So back to my interpretation earlier of the word integrated, so, you know, that's it. Those are the only 2 guiding principles that you have to say whether or not you have a plan, oh, master development plan, excuse me, I'm violating my own rule. But then the second shoe is, in the conditional approval, as you move past whatever this master development plan is, the conditional approval dictates that each one is going to change, because it says the conditional plat shall conform to the approved preliminary plat and shall include all changes to the preliminary plat approval in each phase of the conditional as you go from the 5 lot 6 lot. So
in order to make those leaps of logic or flow, you have to be starting with what's planned for the entire site. Everything you said in my interpretation says we should be seeing a master plan, a master development plan, as most people envision it, which is something the developers had proposed. This is not a proposal. This is a very old document. It may be 10 years old, but this is what most people think of as a master development plan. We're currently not receiving that. We're receiving the phases. And it would seem to me, as I interpret what you just said, we should be getting a master development plan, which is not etched in stone, but lays out how all of the utilities, sewerage, are going to tie into the city.
excuse me, that's not what it says. That's not what it says.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
And I'm not interpreting. All I can do is read the words.
I misunderstood you.
The words are integrated into the city's street, water, and sewer system.
Okay.
That's it. Those are the only words you have to go by.
So the
Integrated.
master plan should show how the site is going to integrate into those streets and waters.
That's what it says. It's a law.
But the and I keep coming back just to how can I interpret that other than to say, I have a master plan. So,
I'm sorry, it's a master development plan, words, as
master
a
development plan.
professor, I have to
Master
do that.
development plan, I'm sure
It's
I'm
not the
getting
master plan.
I'm getting a C- on this. Master development plan. But this is what a lot of folks expect when we hear those words, and when you talk about how the site, how it's going to integrate, how the phases are going to integrate. You can't.
It doesn't say that. It
I'm
doesn't
sorry, I
say the
thought you
phases integrate. I'm sorry.
Proposed phases, you said, you used the word site, proposed phases, and how they should be integrated. You can't, without the proposed phases, you can't tell me how they're going to be integrated.
Well, the way
So-
this works in every other city in Louisiana, we work in dozens, is that is solved at the conditional plat approval process, and that process
understand that.
anticipates changes for every one of them.
I understand that. Back to the conditional plat approval, in most cases, in your experience, is this what you see, or do you see 34 lots, 8 lots, and then 5 lots?
At the conditional, you see 34 lots, 8 lots, 5 lots. At the preliminary approval.
I'm sorry, preliminary.
At the preliminary,
Yeah.
literally, we usually see a plat that shows residential, commercial, industrial with a street grid on top of it.
Okay.
That's what we see,
With a street grid.
a street grid.
Yeah. And it's just, we don't have anything.
But that's
that-
always the preliminary. That
We-
street grid
and we
is
don't
never
have-
the same street grid that comes along
Yes,
when
sir.
they come in with the
We
conditional
don't, I
approval.
understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. There could be unforeseen conditions. There's lots of reasons why you might change.
The market mainly,
The market too, but you still know where your streets are,
generally.
generally. Okay. And everything you said about our ordinance reinforces that I would see more than cutting in 34 lots in a 40-acre parcel. I would see more than just those 34 lots at the preliminary phase.
You know,
for the
I respect
master
whatever
development plan.
happens here, but I can tell you in DeSoto Parish or Avoyelles Parish, we never see that. In St. Tammany Parish, it's preliminary, we never see that. It's a general plan that lays out a general development plan from a land use perspective. Because at that point, none of the details have really been worked out. But I'm trying to just tell you what your law is. You know, I'm not giving you a legal opinion. I'm not the lawyer in this case, although I teach at the law school. I don't teach the law. I teach how the planning rules work.
Well, thank you. I mean, your
Appreciate
explanation and was very clear.
Anytime.
And your whole, the whole information.
So-
Diagram, would that be more of just a conceptual drawing of what he would like the development to look like in the end?
That piece of paper is more than we've ever seen in any community that we've ever worked in before. But it's way more detailed.
I'm sorry. So I asked, would the diagram that Mr. Tom has, is that more of like a conceptual concept of what the developer would like to have? Because I'm under understanding that the approvals come through, you know, it's taken in phases. I mean, I see it different than Mr. Tom. I think I see the phase approach, that you're going to see your master development agreement in phases as phases come,
Yeah.
not as all in one.
Here's how I'll see it as well. Just reading it and going off of Mr. Villavasso's explanation, is that a master development plan depicting all sites and proposed phases of the subdivision. Well, right now, if they only have 34 proposed sites, that's all you're going to see. So that's the master development plan is going to show 34 sites because that's what they have proposed and that's what they have right now. Now that proposal may change down the line to 86 sites. And they would submit a new proposal with a new master development plan for that part of the development.
And,
Let me comment on
Councilman
Mr. Asbill,
Asbill,
just
I
one
can-
second.
So let me
Okay.
respond and
Don't let me forget. I want to comment on that.
yeah, because you're going to probably comment on this too.
Okay.
I appreciate the interpretation of that it's those 34 lots, but there's nothing in the word master as people use that when you're talking about a phase. We don't, as most people, I believe, don't think of a 34 lot phase in a 100+ ultimately developed subdivision as being master in any sense of the word. It is a phase, it is a partial, it's certainly not a master. So when you just get down to, if there's no law, if there's no definition at the legislature, if there are no court cases, people get to use the English language as, what does the term master mean? It doesn't mean the phase, it means the bigger picture. That's my comment. My last comment on this.
Yeah, I would. Okay, I was going to let you finish, Mr. Buddy. I'm sorry, I didn't forget. Okay, so Mr. Absville's comment really rang a bell with me, and we have a unique situation here. We have a property owner that owns, I'm going to use a real technical term, a big hunk of land. Okay, a big hunk of land. Okay, now he comes in and he says, I want to subdivide this piece of property here and put 6 lots on it, okay? This set of rules goes into effect. I'm being real technical here. So this rule say, okay, you want to make 6 lots? What's your master development plan? Well, 6 lots, okay? I'm making 6 lots, okay? But we have a developer that owns a very large piece of land, but he's not coming in for a subdivision approval on 88 acres or 300 lots on day one. Now let me switch cities just for a minute. I want to go to Zachary. We do a lot of work in Zachary. We had a big project in Zachary recently. The developer comes in and says, I own a big hunk of land. And he says, I want to build 350 lots on this piece of property that I own. He is going to execute the subdivision regulations in Zachary, Louisiana, which are very similar to yours, to build 350 lots on his parcel. And guess what he says to the city of Zachary? I have 4 phases. I have a master development plan. Here's my phasing plan. Here's my master development plan. So I bring up these 2 examples to show you that we have a unique situation here. We don't have a developer that is coming in like my Zachary friends and saying, I own 88 acres of land and I want to build 622 lots out here, which legally you might be able to do in Harahan under the R1 zoning. And here are my 16 phases, and here's my master development plan for my 622 lots. That's not what's going on here. We have a developer that has 88 acres, give or take, I might have the number wrong, and they're going to develop this piece for 6 lots, this piece for 22 lots. Let's go back to Zachary for a minute. My friend in Zachary, who wants to develop the 264 lots, guess what? He owns the parcel right next door to that parcel too, and he's already told us that he's coming in next year to develop 300 more lots on that hunk of land. And when he comes in with those 300 lots, he's going to give us a phasing plan and a master development plan that's going to show where the playground is, where the servitudes are, where the green spaces are. So, you know, I give you those 2 examples to show you that, and going back to the mayor's question, I didn't mean to avoid answering you. What we see here as that one piece of paper is so much more than we've ever seen in any other project in the 40 years I've been practicing all over the state of Louisiana for a project like this. And the reason is because we have a single owner who has a vision. You call it a concept, Mayor. I call it a vision, okay? So that's just my word.
Thank you. I'd like to open a public hearing for any general comments. Come on up and we'll
So if I can just say before we start public hearing, because, no, Mr. Go ahead. So there's a lot of people, we want to give everybody time to talk. There will be a timer. We're going to give 2 minutes, if that's okay. If there's anybody needs more time, the council can do a point of privilege, but we know there's a lot of people. We haven't even got to the amendments, so we're just, if everybody can be respectful, is that okay? Everybody's okay with that?
Great.
Is that a yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Come on, Mr. Dave.
Hi, David Trepanier, 125 Colonial Club Drive. I just got a simple question, just simple, Mr. Villavasso. At any time were you paid by Colonial and City of Harahan at the same time?
Yes.
That's all I want.
I want to make a clarification to that. Mr. Villavasso was never paid by the city of Harahan while he was working on the Colonial project. He is paid by Colonial to work on the Colonial project. He is paid by the city to work on all other projects.
I feel like I need to say something, if you don't mind. I appreciate that, Councilman Aspel, clarifying that. And I answered the gentleman's question because I'm trained to be honest and give yes or no answers to those kind of questions, okay? But life is more complicated than that. And you explain the complication, and I actually teach ethics at Loyola Law School and at the University of New Orleans, and I've given ethics lectures all over the United States. And I'm very strict with my own ethics and the rules regarding my 20-year history with Harahan is governed by my ethical responsibility to working on Harahan. Over the years, I have worked for Colonial with the understanding, with the written understanding by both parties, both the City of Harahan and the owners of Colonial, that I will not cross those two streams together. And the Board of Ethics has signed off on that. And if any party in those arrangements decided not to agree to that, the entire arrangement would fall apart. But as of today, it is an ironclad rule, and all parties have agreed to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mr. Trepanier, just to clarify, Mr. Villavasso does not work for the city of Harahan at Colonial's advice. He will advise me, and the rest of the city, we have our own engineer that works for us, and he advises me on Colonial. His name's Tim Jackson, and he works for Myers Engineering.
City planner.
City planner.
I'm sorry, city planner, and his name's Tim Jackson. He works for Myers Engineer.
He talked about the spirit, and we mentioned the word spirit. It seems like he's the one twisting the words for the spirit of Colonial. So I just want everybody to know that he was getting paid by the city.
Well, Mr. Villavasso's been here long before me and authored the master plan, and I thought he'd be a great asset to use on everything outside of Colonial, because of course I don't want to cross, I don't want to step over ethical boundaries myself. But like I said, we do have a separate individual. His name's Tim Jackson, and he couldn't make it here tonight because his son's in from Prague. He tried to be here, but his family's first,
I just want to state very quick. So the Duplantis Design Group, the engineers on, our engineers on the project, has to leave in about 30 minutes. So I didn't know, I'm trying to mediate a little bit here.
Yeah.
If anybody has any sewer, if y'all have any sewer
Yes,
questions.
I apologize to the public. He was sitting in the back corner there. He was out of sight, out of mind. So we're gonna, if we don't mind, we're gonna bring up the one more professional to explain the drainage and sewage stuff, and then we'll take general public comment, please.
And then I had, basically what I asked Scott to do was come and, he can take questions, but also, Scott, if you wouldn't mind, speaking. So obviously, Steve did I think a solid job of explaining preliminary, conditional, final. And then you can speak to real life on the pond as it relates, not even on behalf of Colonial, but on behalf of the Blake.
Scott Tabry, I'm with Duplantis Design Group, 4141 Bienville Street. Like Danny said, he just asked me to come up here, say a few words about the pond. So when we looked at the pond years ago, the thought here was kind of look at it twofold. First, from the city's ordinance standpoint of, I think, maintain a 10-year post-developed flow rate that's equal to or less than the pre-developed flow rate. And also because the area kind of acted as a ponding area, we also took into account cut fill. And really, if they were developing this thing almost anywhere else, the pond would be much smaller. But because of the cut fill and trying to offset the storage, we looked at 10, 25, 50, 100-year storm events and took in, I think, 250 acres of overall area getting to us and tried to basically decrease the water surface elevation slightly in the post-developed condition, so have a negligible effect in the full build-out post-developed scenario. So I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback that I know the pond wasn't designed with blinders on. We know that the area ponds water here. We're encouraging water to come back into our pond. That's what it's designed for. That's what we want it to do.
So in layman's terms, the pond is developed to take on any water on the property after development and the water that was coming from the surrounding properties?
Right, because essentially what was happening before, and I'm not trying to get too far into it, is Jefferson Highway. The pipes under Jefferson Highway are essentially undersized, causing water to back up, and almost Jefferson Highway acts as a dam. So we realized that, and we wanted to just provide enough storage in there so that during a 100-year storm event, it was, like I said, a negligible effect in those major storm events.
Any questions?
I have some questions.
Okay.
But
So why don't we do this? Sir, why don't you come sit here? Steven, you go there. And then Mr. Buddy, just so everybody.
yeah, I'll wait. Let the public ask their questions.
I'll let you come sit up here. then.
My question was just, was the pond engineered or designed to deal or prevent with mosquitoes?
What was the last few words?
Was the pond designed or engineered to treat or prevent mosquitoes? Is there some type of water moving feature? Are you treating with chemicals? Something basically to prevent the large standing body of water.
So
to
the ownership
generate
group
insects?
actually has a maintenance contract in place right now. So they are maintaining the pond to prevent mosquitoes.
Perfect, thank you.
If y'all do come up to speak, just state your name and address too, please. Sir, do you have a question for him?
No, I have.
Okay.
So my questions are, and I understood generally what Councilman Asbill said from a presentation that your group made to Planning and Zoning about 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
It was going to be a dry detention pond. It's not a dry detention pond. Was that because of some engineering issue or?
So I guess the definition of dry detention pond is kind of out there. It is probably holding a little bit more water than it should be, but I will say that I think the perception that it was going to be from whoever,
It was Tommy Buckle.
It was Tom. So the perception that it was going to be, I'll call it soccer fields and playgrounds in that bottom of the pond. The truth is, we're in South Louisiana. We don't have great soils. I'm not sure that was ever going to be the case.
What he described was dry in a period of a few days without rain because the water is going to bleed off, with some swales, or I don't know what the proper, little ditches through it to collect water so you would have dry. And he made it sound like there'd be grass. But that's just a clarification. It was explained that it was going to be a dry detention pond, and it's obviously much different from what Mr. Buckle explained. But one of my concerns, and I'm hopeful that you and the city's engineer can give us some insight, and I've already got some insight from the city's engineer, is some definition that you two engineering groups are using. You've already used it. You guys have submitted computations, and they've concurred. You didn't just pull what you came up with out of the air. It's not voodoo. It was explained to me that you used a Jefferson Parish standard. And that explanation came from an engineer that works with our engineer group. And I'd like to see that get into the document. I'd like to see that as a standard that the engineers have said, this is what we're making our calculations on. I trust you guys are great and know what you're doing. I'd like to see that standard get into the document. So one of the items that I'm going to propose later as an amendment to the amendments is some agreement, hopefully, wording that the engineers say, this is how we're computing this. Not the thousands of pages of but what is the standard? And I drafted 4 paragraphs, I copied 4 paragraphs that our engineers gave us. And it so can you tell me a little bit, what's the book? What's the rules by which you're computing this? Everything you said, I understand. The surrounding area that used to drain there, the water that falls on, not the calculations for that, but what's the rule book you're using?
So we use, if I think I'm understanding your question correctly, so correct me if I start getting off course here. Jefferson Parish has standards for design, as does LADOTD, the state. So what we did is we assumed in a pre-developed condition, it's all undeveloped property, which is obvious.
Right.
In a developed condition, we had 15 acres commercial, roughly 15 acres of pond area, which we know is about 17 acres now, because we're trying to save trees in the pond, which remains undeveloped. And then the remainder of the property would be residential. So
Correct.
they have land use codes that essentially go with them, and it increases the amount of runoff as you increase that number. So those numbers were adjusted, put into the program. I think they're stated in the report as well. They're called runoff curve numbers.
And I appreciate everything you said, and I actually probably understand about 90% of it.
Okay.
But you started with that something, and is it some Jefferson Parish verbiage? What was your guidance for everything you've talked about? You had a methodology.
So we were looking at for our peak flow rate off the site. And Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, the city of Harahan may have it in the ordinance that it's a 10-year post-developed flow rate has to be regulated to a 10-year pre-developed flow rate.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to get to.
We do.
And that may be accurate.
So it's 80 section
And I wouldn't mind
142.
if Rick wants to come and
86,
join in, because for me, this is a big deal. And for the citizens, we understand there's a drainage standard, and it's pretty significant. And the owners have stepped up, and they're going to continue to do this. I just want to try to get in the agreement with a little more clarity. Exactly the standard.
Just because I have the reference here, if you want to write it down, it's 86-142 in our code that talks about the drainage standards.
And thank you, Councilman Asbill, but what's more important to me is when our engineer and Duplantis' engineer get together and they say, this is the 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs that the city of Harahan wants to get into this agreement. And it's the same 1, 2, or 3, or 4 paragraphs that you guys are performing your calculations as Duplantis for the developer. It's not a win, it's a point of clarity. Let's get it in the agreement, because that's the standard by which we expect the pond to be, the detention pond to be built and maintained. And it's not fully built. So if you guys can put your heads together and come up with those 1, 2, or 3, or 4 paragraphs that I know y'all agree on, then we can put it, if it's the city of Harahan or if it's Jefferson Parish. I was told it was Jefferson Parish by you guys, but it may be the same verbiage.
And just a clarity, I think Jefferson Parish and City of Harahan have the same requirements.
And you reference it you reference the code in the ordinance here, right? I mean, are you wanting to pull something out of the code and stick it into this document?
I want to say that my goal would be nothing more than to say that the detention pond is going to be constructed in accordance with, and if it's all clearly covered in the Harahan code, that's, and Rick, you concur because you're our technical expert, that's all it needs to be. I'd like to have that as simple as, can be 1 sentence or it could be 3 paragraphs. What Ann provided was 2 or 3 paragraphs, as I recall. And I'm not trying to add words to the agreement. I just want a standard.
So I'd put to everybody, but specifically the engineers, in paragraph 25 of the amended development agreement, we talk about the different drainage impact analyses that have been conducted. And so in that is in there it states kind of the standard that you've run the plan under, and it says that Myers Engineer has concurred in that plan. So long as you continue to work through those plans and update those plans, and you continue to concur in those plans, I would say that it's in those plans as far as the calculations and whatever they do. And so 1, 3, 4 paragraphs, I mean, sure, it could be put in here and, make the agreement that much longer, but I would put to you that it's adopted in here by reference to the plans.
I would say it's not clear. But it may be as simple as a sentence. What I had drafted, and which the owners did not agree to, but I wanted to make the case to the council and to the mayor, is that we just need a clear stand. The drainage is, everybody has a different perception of the 1, 2, 3, 4th, and 5th most important things they want to see happen in this development so it doesn't impair the quality of our life. But drainage has to be probably number one. So it's just, if we can add a sentence that these professional engineers representing their parties agree on, and it's clear, that's beautiful.
And what your intent is, so as the property is continued to be developed, they're going to be held to that standard for in the design.
Correct.
Right. And I want to add this. The original drainage analysis was approved by the previous administration and the previous administration's engineer. When they submitted the next development process, you guys asked us to go back and take a look at that, of which we did. They really have exceeded, I don't know if you caught what Scott said, they really have exceeded the requirements of both Jefferson and Harahan. And it's based on that master plan that, well, I say master plan, now there was a discussion. It has to be based on some analysis of how many lots you have, what area you have, how much commercial you have, how much pond you have, how much drainage you have. It has to be, he has to base it on something that this developer's gonna tell him. So every time they resubmit a new subdivision, the drainage analysis has to be updated.
A new phase.
For a new phase.
Okay.
It has to be updated, and it really should be updated not only for that phase, for the whole area, based on whatever the developer's proposal is. And that's for both water, sewer, drainage, and roads.
So do you modify that plan? Originally, it says it's a dry retention pond. Every one of us here has driven by there and see it's not a dry retention pond. So do you modify that plan?
Yeah, you
to
do.
Say, hey, it's no longer
you
a
do,
dry
but
retention
really,
pond.
really,
It's
it
over
was.
X amount of
It had a
water, we need to
ditch
add
in
that
it.
to
It had a ditch in it. So it did have a ditch that had water in
Right.
it. It wasn't completely dry.
Correct.
But there were other areas that we understood were going to be dry too, and I think there is maintenance that needs to be, they need addressed right now.
And Eric, if you don't.
But can you guys, you two professional engineers or firms, can y'all give me a sentence that says whether it's Jefferson Parish or Harahan, and I'm going to assume, Rick, that, and I think I understood, when they say we're going to have 38 houses, the detention pond's got to maintain that. You're going to be doing it under the same rules, which are this Harahan ordinance or the Jefferson Parish standard. And I'm looking for a sentence, or if it's got to be 100 words, it's 100 words. But you know what you're doing, you know what you're basing it on, and you know what he's basing it on because you're concurring. I want to put whatever that basis is into the contract as a standard.
Should I just provide him the language we have drafted already and see if we agree?
Please.
Okay.
And again, I don't want anything more than what you gentlemen have been doing for years. Go ahead.
I have a sentence, and I think it's an easy add. If we add it to the end of paragraph 25, but we just say the basis for any updated drainage impact analysis shall be the same basis as the previous DIA.
It's undefined.
It's defined in the drainage impact analysis. So long as they use the
Well,
same basis and calculations.
Jason, you may be correct. I don't know that. If
The engineer they just told us that their foundation for the study is in the impact analysis. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And you exceeded the parish and the city
Yeah, we
requirement.
That's right.
analyzed up to
So we don't
part
wanna
of your storm event knowledge.
But,
So we don't want to restrict them to say it's using the Jefferson Parish standard or the Harahan standard, because now the standard is lower than what they're actually giving us.
So-
So we want to say it's
So
the same
more
basis
particularly-
as the original impact analysis.
more particularly.
So that it continues to exceed the standards.
The drainage impact design is for all the water that used to be held on Harahan, plus the water that fed, on Colonial, the 88A, plus the water from the surrounding areas that naturally flow to Colonial. That's your baseline.
That's right.
Is that baseline defined in the Harahan Code? Because that's what was explained to me 3.5 years ago at Planning and Zoning, and that's what you guys have done. Thank you. Is that defined?
I don't think that's defined in the code.
Well,
I think that's an additional requirement we had of this.
and that's what I'm trying to put into this agreement. That's the understanding. All I want in the agreement is the understanding.
Yeah, so,
agree to meet Harahan and Parish?
no, because it's a lower standard.
It can't be that
Jason's right
simple,
about-
because you've got to,
about
because that
adding the
gives you a
language he
lower
wants.
standard. Right now, you're exceeding. We want you to continue to exceed.
There's,
Say it
there's
again,
language in the
Jason, please
report,
repeat what
I
you
think
said.
that in
Wait.
the opening paragraph that states exactly what I think we're designing to, and then there's a conclusion paragraph as well. We can pull the language from there and just potentially stick it right into the ADA.
Could you please do that? Run it by Rick. We've got an opportunity to add this later. It doesn't have to be resolved tonight. And all I'm asking is that we,
I think it should be, so that we can get the best clean copy to the public to review before the public hearing for the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I think,
well, I'm happy to,
yeah.
I think he's trying to read something.
So we can get through the public comment period. We can go have a recess and develop some language, and then come back and make another amendment if we need to. But I think it could be as easy as the basis for any updated DIA shall be the same as the bases as conceived in the original DIA. And if we want to find the paragraph and list the paragraph number or something in the DIA, I guess we can do that.
again, and it may be that easy, but
That's
what,
exceeding the parish and the city requirement.
We're already
if you're comfortable with the terminology that Jason has just thrown out there, and that's your recommendation to the council, then I'm happy with it. So if Rick's happy after he looks at it,
Yeah, I'd like to review it.
Yeah,
Because
and-
I don't remember the paragraph.
right, how could you?
Yeah.
But if you can just, you two guys tell us what we're agreeing to here, it's a big deal. And we just want to make sure there's clarity and we don't get into a dispute between the community, the city, and the developer in the future. Nothing, no changes, just clarity. Thank you.
All right, you want to?
I think the lady in the yellow dress, okay, I'm sorry.
We apologize.
I'm trying my best.
It was
to keep
important.
everybody-
It was.
I'm happy you had that discussion because my whole
Maybe
thing-
your name and
Yeah,
address,
Sharon
please.
Polera, McHugh Drive.
Okay.
Okay, my two main things are drainage and sewage. And he was just discussing the drainage, and so the drainage proposed, say there, as many houses as they're asking for. You think that pond is enough? Just one pond?
I do, yes. From as far as I can tell them what we're going to build to this point,
Uh-huh.
yes, I do.
And the other thing is sewage. Well, the professor said certain pipes, if they say they're going to be 5 inches or 6 inches and they put in 5 inches, what's that about?
Are you the
What's
sewage
happening
guy?
with the sewage?
I am, yeah.
Okay, he is a sewage. I just want to make sure he was a sewage guy too.
So we designed the pump station with Blake and all the sewer system that has gone in so far based on the full build-out that was allowed in the previous development agreement. And we obviously had to make some assumptions as far as what would be developed on the commercial side of things, whether it be grocery store, fast food, over and above the Blake, because obviously the assisted living was the only one coming in. So we had to make some assumptions there. So, you know, there'll be a point where we get down the road, and if more lots are allowed on, we'll have to revisit the calculation and look at, you know, in my head right now, having thought about it, it's probably as simple as upsizing pumps in our lift station to get the sewer to its outfall point into the city system.
So extra pumps possibly down the
Bigger,
line?
bigger pumps possibly.
Bigger pumps. Okay, and old build-out means in,
Full build out.
oh, full build-out,
Yeah.
you said? I thought you said old. Okay, full build-out. Okay, and say what that means again?
Development of the entire piece of property.
Okay, so the sewage is taken, you're taking that very seriously.
Let me add on to your conversation about the sewage. Okay, so Colonial Club, that's okay. Colonial Club, actually, that whole development actually has its own lift station, which picks up its sewage and moves it to the plant. The Colonial sewage doesn't come through Imperial Woods, it doesn't come through McHugh, Donellan, Sedgefield, OK, it doesn't go through any of those but I'll come back to that. Most of the development does not come through that. The 22 lots in the back, the bigger lots, we may allow after they do serious pipe inspection and everything, so the 22 lots in the back could possibly, we're down the road from that, but they have to fulfill a lot of requirements. However, most of that sewage, 90% of that sewage, will not even come your way. It's in a direct line that goes right to Lift Station 6, up Colonial Club Drive, down Wilson, and then off to Lift Station 8. So none of that sewage will affect you at this time until the 22 houses are in the back, and they'll have to do full inspection of every single piece of pipe that sewage will go through if we allow it. They've asked it from me once. I didn't feel that was sufficiently done, so I vetoed that ordinance. It's the only ordinance I've ever vetoed. So I did veto that because I need to make sure that that is done properly and inspected and videoed. And I've become a little bit of an authority, not an expert, because that's all I seem to do since I've been in office is go fix sewage. But it is because that's what people care about. You're exactly right. People care about their powers coming on and that their toilets are flushing. So you get those two, you've won half the battle. And so that's what I do. I study it, and we study a lot.
So, one more, I thought I heard somebody say it'll be integrated into.
Ma'am, can you speak in the microphone,
Oh,
please?
yeah.
Just so that, okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
One more thing. I think you said something about a hurricane event, if that happens in with the drainage issue. Okay, a rain event floods our street.
We know.
So, I mean, if we have rain like we've had recently, will that pond handle that?
It's designed, so we're looking at, essentially what happens is the water gets into the ditch in front of Colonial Club, and we've sized the pipe coming out of the pond. That's raised up from the bottom level a bit to allow water to funnel back into the pond from the front ditch. Instead of backing up through the rest of the system, it can back up into our pond. So yes, we've sized it to take on water from the adjacent properties, and not necessarily just the immediately adjacent properties. We've also, I think in one of the re-subdivision, or one of the plats that came across recently, there's a servitude from Colonial Club Drive into our pond, and that's there to potentially allow for future drainage to tie in directly from Colonial Club Drive, which could theoretically stretch all the way back over to OK Avenue.
And this undersized Jefferson Highway acts as a dam. Even with that taken into consideration, you think you'll be okay with Jefferson Highway acting as a dam or something because of pipes or?
So what we analyzed is we looked at up to the 100-year storm event of how high the water built up on Colonial Golf Club in a pre-developed condition and how high it's going to build up in a post-developed condition. And that's what we use as our baseline.
And did you base that on how many houses also that is taken
Yes.
into consideration?
Future development you're talking about? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
future
yes.
development.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you had a great question. Let me add to one thing that you said real fast. So we're also looking, this developer is looking to give us a piece of their property to put a pump to the river on. So what happens is if that we can get the studies to go through and shows that the pump to the river is necessary here, what he's going to do is he's going to give us the piece of property to put this on. And so when I took this office in 2019, I know your problems very well. I promised the neighbors from Glenwood to Imperial Woods that we would find a solution. That pump to the river and being able to tie into it is the solution.
Right. I remember you said that in the last meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
But you had a tiny word, but a big word, if.
Well,
If.
Did you realize what this engineer right here just said? He said they have a pipe right now that goes from Jefferson Highway to the pond that flows backwards. So as water builds up in that ditch or drainage canal along Jefferson Highway, that water flows directly to Colonial Country Club. The water from Imperial Woods, all of this water from McHugh and OK, they all go to the ditch on the highway. Once they flow down the ditch on the highway, some of that water goes back into Colonial Development Project as a storage.
Into the pond?
Into the pond and area as a storage to help the rest of the city.
Okay.
He's not just draining his water off of his 88 acres. He's taking water from outside of his 88 acres, storing it on his property.
Okay, in the pond, it can do all that?
It's overbuilt.
It's way overbuilt for what we typically see.
Well, that's good news. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions? Oh,
No, right.
questions for the drainage or sewage professional? Because he'll be leaving here in just a few minutes. Come on up, Mr. Gwaine, because so the camera can hear you. And
Everybody's running the tag.
Ooh,
You
boy.
might want to leave.
Can I leave 10 minutes early?
As I said, you
might
want to
wanna
come
go.
sit here.
You
But you
might
come sit
wanna
here.
leave.
7:30, I gotta
I have a quick question. Well,
All right, so we're gonna cut it down to 1 minute, Ms. Sue, because he does have to leave. I'm
man.
sorry. It's
Just-
Okay,
Just
okay.
just
quick
quick
question.
Quick
Yeah.
question.
Okay, this is, I'm reading from the revised that was used for the Blake, and it says this information is run independently of the adjacent drainage areas, which is roughly 150 acres, and I'm assuming, where is he? Oh, there you are. That's talking about the the area on the Glenwood side and the area on the Colonial Club side. So that drainage study did not take that into consideration.
Which drainage study?
This
you
is
looking
the
at?
revised that you all did for the
So-
Blake,
So there's two studies. There's an overall,
right?
and then the one for the Blake is essentially just showing the development of our property, pre versus post scenario.
But I thought it
flows.
was supposed to be the same, it was supposed to consider everything the same way that the original did.
It's still taken into account, but that is just segregating our property. The overall,
Okay. My other question is, what does it mean on the original drainage study? At the very end, there's a note that says, these calculations will only be considered, I'm paraphrasing, will only be considered accurate if the waters from the Colonial side and the Glenwood side can be gotten to Colonial, the golf course.
so it basically saying that we needed to give it away to get back into the golf course,
Is-
which is
did-
essentially what we've done, putting a 42-inch pipe from Jefferson Highway back into the pond. And we've given an opportunity to get even more water to the golf course, or at least the owners have, by putting a drainage servitude in place.
So when the water starts running back from the ditch
highway, right.
on Jefferson Highway, and the pond is full, if that were to happen, it's going to flow out to Glenwood and Colonial.
Theoretically, when the pond fills up, the water's just going to find its lowest point and go there. That's right.
Right. So I just feel like you all have put things into your plans that sort of protect you and don't protect us.
It's a 100-year plan. I mean, nature can happen. I mean, nobody's going to predict.
No, I
I
understand.
mean, that's a tough one you're trying to put on them.
No.
Yeah, I'm an electrician.
If you think about the detention pond, if you
I mean,
take the
depending on the
water
guy.
at Colonial and you put it in the pond, it gives the opportunity of, from the water from the Q and OK, to get out into the Jefferson Highway system faster before all the Colonial water runs out, if you can follow that. So it gives, having a detention pond, they're holding their water, it's filling up. When their pond is full, our streets are gonna be full too. But it's giving your water an opportunity to get out first before their water gets out. You agree with that, Scott?
Yes, yeah.
Carolyn Clausing, 50 OK Avenue. I kind of came in late, so I apologize if I'm asking a question. But when you were talking about the pond, I was assuming the pond is going to be on the 15 acres that were supposed to be recreational area in the original thing. Is the pond going to take up all the recreational area and there will be no park area there?
So I think the area is approximately 17.32 acres right now, give or
Uh-huh.
take. So no, the pond's not going to take up the entire area.
Okay.
The pond currently exists.
Yeah, I know.
It's big.
Well, I didn't know if they were going to make it bigger and fit, have a 15-acre pond. I don't know. I just wanted to make sure we were still going to have some green area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions not for him.
Okay, well, then let's
Well,
do
then,
that.
let
because
the
he needs
gentleman
to go.
behind you
I'm
go.
sorry, sir, but I tell you what, you be our
We're on
first one,
drainage.
because I know you've been sitting there a long time.
Mine's not directly for him, but kind of in general. So Glenn Grilletta, 51 Dozier. So I learned a good bit about the process tonight. Just want to clarify, this is still preliminary. So awesome questions. I'm learning way more than I thought I would with this whole process. But the engineering, no matter what happens, as they go through the phases, you guys are having to get back together. You have to meet code. So the specifics to all these questions can't be answered until we get through the first stage. I just want to make sure that's the one thing I'm kind of taking from what I got tonight, that until we can get past this, no one has a specific, you said bigger pumps. You're probably going to know exactly how much bigger at some point. Tonight, it's all concept until we get past planning, correct? Just want to make sure I got that.
Yeah, that's right. So with each submission, they have to continue to
Correct.
update their
So
DIA,
whether it's one
TIA,
phase,
sewage,
50
all that.
phases, 200 phases to
Right.
get from point A to point Z.
They got to continue to update
Every
and conversate.
phase comes with another set of drawings, another set of details.
Exactly.
Okay, just wanted to check.
One, Miss Benton.
So the plan already says that the water is going to get back to Colonial from the Glenwood and Colonial side. So why is that note in there that says that these calculations are only valid if? It leads you to think that that hasn't been taken care of.
I'm not sure of the note exactly, but that's why I was in there. We needed to make sure, because I couldn't put the pond on the property and then not give a way for the water to back up onto it. So whether it be the developer who has put the pipe in the ground or the city adding additional water to the pond.
So you're saying that's referring to that having been done,
Yes.
that big pipe?
Yeah, the big
Oh,
pipe is
okay.
in the ground.
Okay.
If the water from them streets already flow in a different direction, he can't take responsibility if it's not flowing his way.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. I think that's all
Thank
the
you.
specific questions for you. Now we're going to open it up.
Thank you, Scott.
Hold on, thank you, Scott.
Now we're going to open up to general public comment, questions, conversation.
Regarding the amendments.
Regarding the amendments to the development agreement.
Okay, very simple. Michael Preble, 57 OK Avenue.
Good evening.
To you, Mr. Aspel. Am I correct that there are going to be 5 points of access to this 88-acre property? 1 potentially on Forte, 1 off Colonial Court, and 3 off of Jefferson, 1 for the Blake, 1 for the retail Colonial side, 1 for the retail Glenwood side.
That's
correct?
not my understanding. I'll have the developer address it, though. From what I envision is there are going to be 2 Jefferson Highway access, the current one that's there for the Blake, and then one more towards the Glenwood side of the property that services both the rest of the commercial and all of the residential within the 40 acres. And then one access to service the interior residential, either on Club or Colonial Club, and then one potentially on the back 13 acres off of Forte. So 4, I think, is what the developer envisions at maximum, but he can clarify that.
Okay, I don't understand how the retail is going to be accessed on the Colonial side.
Well, I don't either. That's
unless-
not my job.
but-
That's his
but-
job.
But
Yeah.
I want to finish my question before
Okay,
somebody
sure.
else talks.
Okay.
Okay. At what point are we going to know about how many oak trees are going to survive?
So that's a good question. And
let me ask my second one.
Oh.
And at what point are we going to know what the lighting plan is?
So
My
you'll-
concern is about light pollution. And
So you'll know the lighting plan, I believe, when it comes up to the conditional approval. They got to submit their lighting
Okay.
improvements and all that. As far as oak trees, the developer's told me that he's drawn lot lines to kind of maximize oak trees, and the HOA regulations will also have certain regulations that state that if it's in a certain amount, if a tree is within a setback, they can't chop it down. If it's in the middle of the lot, obviously they need to get rid of it. But he's drawing the lot lines. And Dan, if you want to come up and clarify that, please. 'Cause
Danny.
I'm sure I butchered it.
No, you didn't butcher it. I mean, right, with regards to lighting, it's conditional. And if there's one thing I'm trying to drive home today, it's all those sewer, and Mr. Gwain, I think, gave the best explanation, is at conditional, you know those things. With regards to trees, I can tell you, and you're free to look at this, we've tried to, or we have, not even tried, but have laid out the lots in such a way that I try to maximize darn near every tree in a setback, because the intention of the HOA, it's worth stating this, that property's a whole lot more interesting to what I envision with every darn tree I can keep. And so the lots, the HOA will state essentially that if the oaks are within a setback, they cannot be taken down without prior approval. And if the setback, if the lot is within a setback, it's a little more, it can be done. However, the setback lines will even probably be adjusted further than what you see here when we get to that stage of the preliminary, to make, to essentially clear out for the oaks.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a tree hugger.
His question on light pollution, are you going to be using LED lighting back there, or you using?
I don't know. I'll tell you conditional, but I would imagine it'll be LED.
It's gonna be LED.
That's
I
the
mean,
most- and that's the most polluting light system.
Oh, is it
Those
really?
are-
Wow,
Those are
thank you.
least
It is.
expensive.
Oh, geez.
My final statement is to you,
You
sir.
want yellow lights.
That
Oh, we want yellow lights. Yeah, Danny, we want yellow lights.
No, we don't.
I believe that anything you do to reduce the potential value of planning and zoning should be avoided. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Roquez, 167 OK Avenue. I'm just really going to address language in the agreement because honestly, a lot of this stuff's in flux. For me, as far as the ADA is concerned, Section 2, lines 57, 76, that last statement basically about any conflicts.
Whoa, give us a chance to catch up.
I got 2 minutes. I'm trying to make the most of it here, baby.
I don't have
You
to
know, work with me.
Oh, hey.
Line numbers?
Enough.
Line 57 to
76, basically stating that there's any conflict between the agreement and the ordinance, that the agreement shall control the conflict. Honestly, if Mr. Delabasso said it's true that we're all going with the Harahan Code of Ordinances, why muddy the waters? I don't think this statement does anyone good and should be stricken from the agreement. Furthermore, in section 25.
Slow down. I'm gonna give you all the time you need.
Oh, yeah,
Slow
we're
down.
gonna give you
Slow
what
down.
you need.
That 2
No,
minutes.
this was when there was,
I'm giving you all the time you need.
we're
Slow
trying to
down.
anticipate that everybody wanted to speak, and we were trying to give everybody time.
We got
But I
time.
also did say we could give more time.
and the engineer had to leave.
And I want this to be a back and forth, if possible.
He's trying to take my job as an auctioneer.
So I would, and I'm not gonna argue the point, I would just put to you that there are parts of this agreement that are more restrictive than our ordinances. And so I would want this agreement to control.
That's
If
about,
we-
it's just
okay.
a conflict. If there is something, they can say, well, no, this is minimum, this is a little stricter.
It just muddies the water for me and makes me nervous.
And we
I got-
appreciate it.
I completely understand. I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. My other comments would be towards section 26. I'm sorry, I said 25 earlier. In lines 228 and then in line 231, I would strike reasonably and such as reasonably, so it would read shall cooperate with Jefferson Parish and then shall grant necessary servitudes and eliminate any wiggle room, as I think it would be more favorable to the city and its citizens reading that way.
Okay.
Point taken.
And yeah, generally agree with the city's attorney that we definitely should spell out the amounts of policy limits and occurrences as well would be a wonderful idea.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
The last section, 54, where the attorney wants to make an amendment
Backing
as
up
far
the
as
indemnity
policy
with
limits,
insurance.
and also I would include occurrences as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wasn't.
You want to make sure?
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephen.
Dale Summit 140 McHugh. I have to rely on on the elected officials and the elected mayor to make these decisions. This is beyond my expertise as far as this agreement goes. The mayor said at the last council meeting that we had 3 opportunities to keep the golf course, the casino, and a condo, and that's in the past. We can't go back in the past and change things, but we can go forward and change. And so tonight, the decisions that are being made tonight is going to affect future generations. So I just have to rely on the elected officials to make the right decisions for our city and our community. My 2 main areas of concern that's been mentioned is drainage and sewage. Sewage has been addressed. The drainage. I'd like to publicly thank the owners of the property for providing the land for the potential pump to the river and for expanding the pond to handle some of the water coming in from the side areas on the Glenwood side and the other Colonial Club side. It's not their responsibility, but to be a good neighbor, they're doing that. And I want to thank them for that. The Pump to the River project, I've seen over the years that there's a lot that can happen from the time something is talked about until the time it actually happens. There has to be studies, permits, and if that's approved, then you have funding to find for that project. I hope that Pump to the River does go through. It'll be a big help. And the final thing I want to say, when I see the flag around Memorial Day weekend, I think of the servicemen that have served, that have serving now, and those that have given the ultimate sacrifice to protect the freedoms for our country. And I want to say, God bless America.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Dale.
you, sir.
Thank you for your service, Mr. Dale. We appreciate it.
Okay, so what, ma'am? There's-
Get in line.
There's a little, you get mine. Yes, ma'am.
Mike Ricks, 33 Colonial Club Drive. So, in this agreement, 84, whereas on February 8th, 2018, owner and the city entered into that certain MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, which contemplated the terms and conditions under which a development agreement may be amended to permit an owner to proceed.
What line you on?
Mike, what line you?
This is the first agreement. This is the ordinance. Okay, so
Which line, sir?
84 through 88.
I don't have an 84.
This is the first agreement.
Yeah, we gotta go find that.
Okay, well,
No, he's.
yes. This is 2021. Attachment
Yeah,
A.
this is before amendment, and this is.
It's in the new one.
Yeah,
Let me see the new one.
we're working from this one. This is the proposed ordinance.
What is
30
it?
to 34.
30 through 34.
Thank you.
Or 30.
So the wording will be the same. Could
Yeah. Okay, so a government does not legislate through an MOU. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
Okay, so my question is, why would that terminology be listed in the agreement?
We just wanted to make sure that it was put out there, and further that the validity of that was never.
Does it supersede the zoning and planning?
The MOU?
Yes.
It does not.
Okay. I just don't think it's a necessary statement to be in the agreement.
I agree.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, one more. I will say that what we were trying to do is just capture the history of all the documents that have been executed, whether we think they're valid or not. And so that's the reason it's in there. But I'm happy to take it out, but we can discuss that here in a minute.
Personally, I think it probably needs to stay in there because it's another potential conflict that if we're not going to rely, if the parties are not going to rely on the verbiage in the MOU, then let's kill it,
I agree.
which is what you're envisioning.
Yeah.
That way we're focusing just on this agreement and the city's ordinances.
Now I agree that we should leave it in there.
Ah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I have a concern about the street that's proposed for the back of the Colonial property. Are they going to have huge trucks coming down the River Road or Riverside Drive to deliver things to these businesses? I would find that very disturbing, since the street's in bad shape now anyway.
Ma'am, you're talking about once the commercial establishments are operating?
Yes. You talked about four entrances, two on.
The commercial entrances are on Jefferson Highway.
They're on Jefferson Highway.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, what is the entrance to the back? What was that for?
Residential.
And it's already there.
It's already street, already there.
Oh, okay, the one that goes into the.
Into the levee.
All right, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Helen Cerise, 7 Colonial Club Drive. She actually had a good point, because when they're constructing those streets, that's kind of what we're trying to avoid right now, is all those heavy trucks coming through the residential neighborhood. So what's the plan for that?
So that was,
The ones in the back.
yeah, well, all of them really, the whole residential. So that was what I believe, and I'm kind of speaking for y'all, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the intention of one of the introductions of the ADA was to establish a construction road coming off of Jefferson Highway. And so if the ADA is established, then yes, then it definitively would come, that would be established for construction.
That would go all the way to those back
So,
22?
oh, so say there's a portion that's carved out of 5 or so, then no, it would come through there. It would, it's my intention, y'all can, so if, let's say that a 5-acre parcel's bought in that back section and 5 homes are built, then those are likely going to be constructed by coming the typical route of, well, whatever it is, whether they would come Jefferson Highway to Colonial to, what is that club, to Forte.
That would be the typical route, but right now the movie trucks are coming down where it's really a no truck route. So
Yeah, they should, so I don't mind stating, we need to start finding them. I mean,
well, Tim is not allowing that.
so, no, I don't, well, so Tim can speak for himself, but I think Tim's been in support of the project, but
No, I understand supporting the project, but it is a no truck route. And if that, I mean, the precedent has been set now that all these big movie trucks are coming down a no truck route. And
Yeah.
so once they start
And I don't know,
constructing that.
I understand a no truck route more than anybody in here. But if you're getting it delivered to your house and an 18-wheeler pulls up, he's coming to your house, right?
That's a little different than
I understand.
18 movie
I
trucks
understand.
coming one after another down
So
my
I
street.
think, so the chief has traffic enforcement in the city. I'd like him to explain truck routes if possible.
You don't have to explain truck routes. Well, getting off
I
topic.
think address what happened with the movie company.
bringing in the trail trucks. It's just like if you had a delivery for a moving van coming to your house,
Gotta
we
get
have
it.
to allow it, even though it's a no truck route. They had a business at 42 Colonial with the movie company. One of the problems not going on Colonial from Jefferson Highway was the low-hanging oak trees that the trucks couldn't make it through. They were hitting the trees. So a lot of them were taking River Road coming in to go to their establishment, so to speak. Now, we did cite it
aware
when
of of
they
that,
were
but it's a
speaking.
lot of
Pardon?
trucks. It's a lot of trucks through a
It's
residential
it's a
neighborhood.
commercial establishment or a commercial business taking place in a residential neighborhood that doesn't have major road access. It's a problem.
Right, and that's not even my point. Okay.
Okay.
So, just kind of a general comment is that this whole thing that we're doing here is regulating the entire development, but, I'm sorry, the entire master plan development, but we don't really have that, as Tommy said. We don't really, we're trying to put rules around something that we don't know what it is right now. So it seems like we're trying to make the rules before we know what's going on. And that's just my overall comment. I have a couple other, if you don't mind. Line 75 and 76. I think we looked at this one once before, but I'm not sure if I heard what the answer was. If there's any conflict between this agreement and ordinances, the provisions in this agreement shall control. So there's, later in here, there's something about height in the back, 50 feet. I think that's higher than what's allowed right now.
Correct.
It is.
We agree.
So you're saying that they can build 50 feet, but nobody else can build
Just
50
on
feet?
They can
levee
build
lots
50 feet.
adjacent to the river.
But the Pettits have a levee lot adjacent to the river, and they were not allowed
Well,
to
they
build
weren't then, correct.
to that height. So you're letting them do something that other people could not do.
Other people could have came in and asked for a variance.
They did.
I wasn't up here at the time.
That is not a good excuse.
I wasn't here at the time.
All I'm
Because
saying
if I
is
bought a
that-
house and built on a levee, I'd want to see over the levee.
Okay, but we said on line 56 and 57, your comment to that was that this is more restrictive, but it's not more restrictive in some parts.
Some aspects, I said some aspects are more restrictive.
I didn't memorize.
Okay. Sorry. I just wanted to be clear.
Okay, but so the 50-foot, that's something that's been agreed.
That's less
No.
restrictive, yes, ma'am.
It's in the.
That's
it's-
more restrictive.
50 feet
I
is
mean,
less.
it's
50 feet height is
It's
less.
less, sorry,
That's
it's
right.
less restrictive.
That's right. And so this agreement would control
All right.
on this property.
The levee lots.
Now, on the levee lots, I'm open to changing the city ordinances to allow all lots adjacent to the levee, if somebody wants to propose
That wasn't where I was going.
Okay.
All right. Line 129, that whole section's been deleted. I'm not sure why, because the original agreement, you've been dealing with this for 2 years, I've been dealing with it for like 20. The original agreement for this was that the sort of the beauty of Colonial Club would remain the same. And part of that is all of those trees that line that street. So once you put houses down that street, we're losing all those trees. Well, if you look at the first ones that are built, there's a lot that are missing.
Were those trees cut on the property owner's property, or were they cut on the parish's property? Colonial's a parish road, I believe, and there were some trees cut. I apologize, I haven't driven down it. There were some trees cut, I know because of Facebook. Were they on the property owner's property, or were they on the Jefferson Parish?
I'm not sure what trees you're talking about.
But I don't think you'll have a problem speaking, but yeah, I think you're speaking of lot 7 that bought it, and they did have portions of them onto his property.
On his property, cut trees down. I mean, the reality is, folks, we get to do that when you own property. What I heard the developer say, Danny said that when they develop the HOA, they're going to put restrictions based on setbacks. I guess you mean the zoning setbacks. So if it's a 20-foot front zoning setback and there's a tree on it, Your intention when you develop the HOA is to say, you can't cut this tree down without HOA approval?
Yeah, and I don't mind saying, so when I am saying that, I'm glad you actually brought that up. I am really clarifying it's for the HOA of the interior lots. But look, nobody's more on board than me with trying to find a way to protect the oaks particularly that are on Colonial.
Sure.
And I've actually had difficulty doing that recently with lot 2. The problem, to your point, is I sell that lot.
Danny, you need to come
Yeah.
sit back down, darling. Just stay.
Yeah, and all I'm really making a point there is, yeah, you won't have a fight up here if you want to try to find a way to say those. I'd be extremely supportive of it. I will tell you, it's been, I mean, I've actually turned down offers on lot 2 and kind of pushed them away because they wanted to remove that oak. And I'm like, it's crazy, the oak's up, it doesn't make sense. And I was successful in pushing them away, but I do have to tell you, they didn't have to. They could have just bought the lot and cut the oak.
But if you are going to develop these lots and you put in those trees are included in that setback, can we make that part of this agreement?
Not as so on those interior lots, that's all me, right? That's all mine.
I'm talking about the Colonial.
I know, and that's what I'm explaining. I don't own that parish property. And I don't, that's really what you're talking about, are these ones that's right between the people's property and the parish property. There's also this other larger question of, you know, the sidewalk placement. This first one, we've just gone ahead and said, okay, I really don't want to cut this pine because it's, even though it's a pine, it's one of the nicer pines. And so we've put it down onto our lower section, which, you know, I would have preferred to have it closer to the road, obviously, bigger front road. But that comes into effect too. The larger question is I'm saying, look, I'm supportive of trying to keep trees, especially the oaks.
I mean, I'd like to keep all of the ones that line my street.
So they have people calling right now, complaining about where his sidewalk's at on the house that's on Colonial, because it's behind the trees. If you go by the rules, you'd cut every one of them trees down to put that sidewalk where it's supposed to be.
I don't think that's what they
Listen.
intending.
Oh,
You
we
think
have
they
citizens.
want you to cut down the tree?
We
and
have
put the-
citizens in Harahan right now complaining, saying you should cut the trees down and put a sidewalk where the trees are. Totally disagree.
And I'll just speak.
Because that's where it's supposed to be by code. We adjusting to work with them to save the trees.
Well, don't listen to those people.
I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to. But it's more than one person called and asked that
Don't
question.
listen to any of them.
But I believe,
All I'm saying is,
I
I
believe
really
Danny's doing what he
like my
can to save
trees.
trees.
I like my trees. I'd like to save my trees. And if you're going to build there where it was not planned to build on that street. If you're going to put that in here, which wasn't, I don't believe that was in the original, I think you should at least try to maintain the beauty of the street. That's it.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any engineering questions? Because the city engineer has to step out to a
Yeah.
family engagement.
Not
Well,
to
do
mention,
we
he's
have-
costing us by the minute here.
Do we have,
He's charging us by the minute, so we want to get him out of here if possible.
do we have the agreed engineering verbiage to get it into the, regarding stormwater?
Can we take a 10-minute recess, and maybe we
Mr.
can,
Riggs speak first?
after Mr. Rick speaks, can we take a 10-minute recess, hammer that out so the engineer can leave?
City engineer?
Yes, sir.
So there's been a lot of concerns about the Colonial Club Drive and the cement trucks or dump trucks or moving trucks, whatever it is, that continually roll down the street. Does the load, I know there's an 8-foot thick clay barrier, that we all sit on. Some of us have built with pylons, some of us have not. That constant vibration across the street, pile drivers, concrete trucks, earth moving equipment, things like that, does that have any bearing on that top, 8-foot thick layer of clay, subsiding or anything of that nature? And if it does, should it be monitored?
It can definitely be monitored. If it's truck after truck after truck, it's gonna tear the street up. But the streets are designed to handle some truckloads, you know,
Yeah.
Rick,
intermittent.
Rick, can you come up to a microphone?
You want to sit here? Seems to be the designated seat.
Danny, when you.
Oh, no, darling, you're going to sit here? You sit, there you go.
Did you put pile under your house? Did you put pile under the house that was built there? Did you drive them or shake them in? How did you do them?
They did, no, I think they drop hammered them, but they, vibration monitored. Is that, I don't even, I mean, I'm asking the question, is that required on
Yes.
licenses to do vibration?
I don't think it is. I don't think.
Danny, it's pretty standard for pile driving companies because they get sued.
Yeah, they do.
So they
get
do,
sued.
they do it without argument.
But I don't think a pile driver is going to damage the road. I think, and the properly loaded concrete truck isn't going to damage the road. But if it's 30 concrete trucks, I hope they're going to go off of Jefferson Highway and not down Colonial to pour the streets.
I guess
I mean,
my
that's
question,
the strategy, right?
my question to kind of reiterate it is that not so much that it's coming down the street, but the direct impact of those vehicles moving on that, and I'm asking not just for myself, but for the surrounding residents. The impact of those vehicles driving over that, pounding on that, you know, constant slab, will that have any bearing, and I want this, you know, to be clear for people around, will that have any bearing or any, or direct result of that, all those houses and all that weight and all those things being done in that area, will that have any bearing on the surrounding residents?
Being that far, I don't think it will. But you know what we can do? We can, and it wouldn't cost that much to do for the developer or the city if we have a real issue, is to do a sample. We'll monitor the vibrations for, you know, the concrete truck or a pile driving. Did he say he would drove piles?
He drove pile.
He drove piles. So, I mean, like one of the councilmen just said too, you know, a lot of the pile drivers, they like to monitor their, when they're right next to another house, they like to monitor it.
I was just kind of asking in a general question, because I
Yeah,
think
don't
that's going to come.
And generally, I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay, that's all.
Does anybody else?
Move for a 10-minute recess.
All right, motion for a 10-minute recess by
Wait.
Councilman Asbill.
Does anybody have any more questions for Rick?
Well, we're going back.
We're going to go back.
Oh, we're
with
doing the
Rick.
language,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
All right, no one else, can I get a second? 10-minute recess?
Second.
Second by Councilman Buddy, all in favor?
Yay.
Yay.
5 yeas, 4 yeas, 1
Cool.
absent. We're going to go to recess
I
for 10
want the
minutes.
second one now, I'm ready.